Good evening, and thank you for joining Ponte Politique once again in this wonderful Sunday. Umtungwa uyengwayo Malinge undima unkumbuzo uthando lwethu kaDlanga. Your host once again welcomes you for being part of this discussion. Remember, as we had said over the years or over the months, the first important thing for everything that we do in this discussion is to click the subscribe button on our YouTube page, Pon the Politique. Click the subscribe button because it is free of charge, and we need you to take part in all these directions. As you can see in the background, I'm not in my usual spot and I'm not in my usual studio, but we are here nonetheless. So we welcome everybody who is watching with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you're following us on Facebook, please share the video, share the live broadcast so that the majority of people are able to hear us, so that the majority of people are able to see us, and so that the majority of people are able to take part in this discussion that we are going to have today. Today we've got one wonderful discussion, and I say so even if it's me who is saying it. If you remember, on the 24th of May, 1921, a large number of people who were led by Prophet Enoch Mgijima of the amaSirayeli Church were mowed down by the colonial white supremacist government in Dabelang, what is known as, in a place known as Bulhoek. So today, we have taken the time as part of the celebration and the commemoration of the 101st year of that particular moment, that particular battle that I refer to, or that particular war. We have then decided to look at one particular aspect of Enoch Mgijima, the prophet of the amaSirayeli and the prophet of the black people in South Africa. You will understand that by introducing this topic might be seen as a little bit controversial to some, because some people might want to say, no, why are you making Enoch Mgijima a politician? Stay up and keep with us right through the program. You will be able to understand why we have brought in this particular discussion. We are not diminishing the spiritual aspect of Prophet Enoch Mgijima, but today we want to be looking at some of his political outlook and some of his political views in relation to the period that he was participating or that he was involved in. So if you don't know amaSirayeli, you can Google it and type in Church of God and Saints of Christ or amaSirayeli and Bulhoek Massacre. You will be able to see and understand what we are talking about. So we are starting a new century of the Bulhoek moment, of the Bulhoek war from this year, which is the 101st year of the killing of amaSirayeli. So wonderfully, we've got a guest, and I'm sure many of you might know him as amaSirayeli. He's one of the sons of the prophet, and also is one of the public commentators of Bulhoek Massacre. Jola, Mtaka Masoleng, good evening, sir. How are you doing?
No, good evening, my brother. I'm doing well in this cold weather in Twan, and good evening to you and all those who are watching us. I'm glad to be here, brother.
Yes. Thank you very much, my brother, for taking the part and taking the time to be with us in this particular discussion. Let us run through who is Zolani Masoleng in a very, very short and sweet type of introduction. Who is Zolani Masoleng in the context of this discussion?
All right. Look, myself, I am born from a family of amaSirayeli. amaSirayeli having been with the church, our family from the early 1900s. one of those converts in around 1912 in the Kamastone area. One gentleman called Jimmy Mafui was also baptized in that ceremony, and that was my great grandfather. So all of us then, our grandfathers, our grandmothers were born in this church, our mothers and our aunts and so on. And even myself, I was born in this church. And then over, the number of years, I have been writing a lot by way of articles and so on around reflecting on this massacre. And I've been writing a lot about it purely because from childhood, growing up in our family, it's part of our DNA that on the 24th is Kumbuzo. And therefore, ever since I was born, this was always part of my life. And then I started paying more attention, reading more, writing more about it. So I'm currently working on a book. Hopefully it will be finished. I don't know when. Trying to compile all of the writings I've done in the past into that. That's reflecting on what the Bulhoek Massacre means to some of us. So this is a topic that is very dear to me. Yes, my brother.
No, thank you for that, amaSirayeli, and thank you to those who are watching with us, especially if there are people who are the amaSirayeli or belong to the amaSirayeli heritage, belong to the amaSirayeli church, and they wish to make some comments and inputs in relation to this. Your comments and inputs, questions, and everything else is welcome. And let us start from the beginning, Mtaka Masoleng. We are talking here about a prophet of amaSirayeli who was Prophet Enoch Mgijima, but he's known to be a church leader. He has led, and he is known that he had left the Wesley Church. So the person that we're talking about here is a person who can be regarded to be in a theological platform, in a spiritual platform, if one were to say. But we decided to say that today we are talking about his politics. Now, can we address what do we mean by the politics according to this particular topic, the politics according to Mgijima? What do we mean when we say politics in relation to this context, so that people do not misunderstand why we had opted to have this type of discussion about the politics of a man of God? Can we address that?
Yeah, look, it's naturally a very very ironic or very strange thing. One can try to look at Bulhoek or even look at Prophet Mgijima from with political lenses. And we must say, from the onset that Prophet Enoch was not a politician as we understand politics today, or even politics of those days. He was squarely a man of God. His message was a message that originates from a spiritual perspective. And therefore, by this topic, we are not suggesting that he was a politician in a sense of at the time he belonged to any political organization, or at the time he was pursuing a certain political agenda. No, that's not what the topic is saying. But the reality is that Bulhoek did not happen in a vacuum. Bulhoek happened in a certain context, and that context can be devoid of politics. At the time of the Bulhoek in 1921, there was a political problem. And that political problem, arose, as a result of what we know, the centuries of colonization of the African continent. And also that political problem extended even further with the 1913 Land Act. So as much as Prophet Mgijima did not emerge, as a political response, but the circumstances under which the church originated were highly political. Even the response of the regime to amaSirayeli in Dabelang was political before the massacre, during the massacre, and also even after the massacre. And therefore, the topic, when it talks about politics according to Prophet Enoch Mgijima, it's actually to look at what the political significance of some of his stances and also some of his response to the regime. And what is key there is that, the attitude of Prophet Mgijima and even the attitude of amaSirayeli towards the regime was actually, an attitude that questioned and even rubbished the notion that, a government of that day could, exercise authority over people when it was standing on very questionable values. So he basically questioned the values of the political system, and even the notion of anyone to think that he should have been or could have been a subject of such politician with questionable values. So when we look at it from that perspective and with those lenses, his stance reject politics with no values, and values such as, justice, values such as righteousness, which were totally violated in Bulhoek, and many others that we are going to talk about as we move along. So whichever way one looks at it, there are very significant political lessons that we need to draw.
One can draw from, one can draw from majority of some of this work. Yet, and also when Namtanaka Masoleng is that because majority of the time, and especially with the colonial education that was brought on the African people, there was this element that we men are political animals, especially the Greek philosophers who came up with the argument that we are political animals. We've had thinkers in the African continent who said that we are social beings before we are even political animals. We are social animals that produces, therefore, a political outlook. So I want to clarify it again that by saying politics according to Mgijima, we are not reducing Prophet Enoch Mgijima to a mere politician. But secondly, we want to put it across that the argument that always is understood that politics is about being a dirty game. I think that is a little bit unfair to have politics a dirty game, because the people like Abu Enoch Mgijima had shown us that you can have political views, you can be a political participant, but you stand for justice, you can stand for noble outcomes, and as you had said, righteousness, as you had said earlier. So people must not think that we are saying that Mgijima was a mere politician. No, but he had political views. Now, give us a context again of Mgijima at the period with which you understand him, because that would give us an understanding of what are his political views in relation to what transpired, not only in relation to the Bulhoek moment, but also in relation to him and how he views certain things. Here, I want to move from this trajectory. Those who know Enoch Mgijima's story, he once spoke to or sent a message to the ANC conference or ANC Congress that was held in Komani in around the 1900s. And he sent a gift of a beast. Atikubo kubantu be-ANC sichala ilitye elinye kodwa nina nilitshala ngokwenyama thina silitshala ngokomoya, meaning that we are pushing the same struggle, but you are pushing it in from the flesh, but thina we are pushing it from the spiritual perspective. Now, with that context in mind, provide us with the context with which Mgijima was living, and that he had started the church amaSirayeli, and that led actually to the killing of people in that Bulhoek War. What was the context of South Africa at the time?
Look, you know, the context of South Africa at the time, you were dealing largely. There were many, you know, aspects, but what was key at the time in South Africa was the issue of land. You know, it was so key, so much so that, you know, almost everything that was being done, it revolved around it. And we were dealing with a time in which the Europeans, either being English, Dutch, even if they later called themselves Afrikaners or whatever name, you know, that they formed the Union in 1910. So you had a group of 2 European invaders who were then consolidating their hold on the land. Now, you know, 1913 was very significant in that they were then entrenching the land that they had won or they had colonized Africans, you know, centuries earlier, you know, from the unjust wars of colonization. So in other words, the regime of the day or the invaders, they were single-handedly doing everything they wanted to do to protect the right of conquest. So they had won the land through conquest. So everything that they were doing then, you know, after 1913 and even before, and to a very large extent even now, they are still holding on to the land. They are holding on to the land today just as they held to the land then and even centuries earlier, purely because of they were claiming a right to that land, purely because of the claim they won that land in battle. And therefore, any, you know, African, whether an individual or organization, political or religious, that was seen not to be accepting that reality, you know, was therefore an enemy of the regime one way or the other. So the issue of the land is so central to the massacre in 1921, so much that if there was no colonization, I doubt Bulhoek would have happened. If there was no 1913 Land Act, I doubt that Bulhoek would have happened.
Yeah, and therefore, probably.
Yeah. And therefore, you know, with that, you know, the loss of land by Africans meant a life of poverty. It meant the destabilization of family. It meant, unemployment. And as Africans were being dispossessed of their land, they were pushed more and more into the mines. And those who didn't want to go to the mines were then forced through a system of taxes to pay, for animals, to pay for their head.
Including the dogs. Including the
for
dogs, they would have to pay a tax fee. But Jola, Mdaga Masoleng, what I'm picking up here, you are saying that there was a deprivation of a right to life that was taking place during this period, and for the Africans, as we understand the Africans from history memorial, the life of an African is always linked to the land, which you've spoken to just a few minutes ago. That therefore, the dispossession of the land meant that there is a deprivation of life of the African people. This included amaSirayeli, if one were to say it. Am I hearing you correct when you link these two, that the land dispossession meant that the right to life of an African was therefore thrown out of the window in the eyes and ears of the European invaders?
Look, the right to life, can never be separated from the right to land. In actual fact, it's so inseparable.
Can you repeat that from the top, Utini?
I'm saying the right to life is so inseparable, to the right to land. So you cannot talk about the right to life if people don't have a right to land. And Africans knew that, and some Africans still know that even today, because you need land to do anything. You need land to live. You need land to plow. You need land to do everything. So when you
need land to worship. In the case of Prophet Mgijima and his followers, you need land to worship.
Exactly. In the case of Prophet Mgijima, they were killed purely because of they were worshiping, and they were being told, now that we have taken the land over, you have nowhere to worship, and therefore you have a choice. And that choice is that it's either you listen to us and forget about your worship and your God and your theology and your own beliefs, purely because of you do not have land. And even in the land that you say you own, we can only allow so many people, and beyond that, you are too many, and therefore you should not stay there. So you can also see how even that literal, the lack of land for many congregants in those years led to them being killed, purely because of they wanted to worship at a particular place, and the regime of the day felt that you cannot do that. So in a literal sense, they were killed for the land. And then also, the centrality of land, to the right of Africans to life is such that, those who have managed to annex the land of Africa have been able to extract the resources to Europe, and they've developed their own countries to where they are today, purely because of they've managed to come. So the issue of land, there can't be talk of fundamental human rights if there is a continued violation of the African rights to land.
And I think sorry, Zolan, and I think you are raising a very critical point of interest here, because you're saying they were killed because of the land, and it links again to what we were saying, that the right to life means the right to the land, and if you contesting the invaders, the European invaders on the land already, because they see this as their land, and therefore they are willing to kill you. They are willing to eliminate anything that contests them on the particular issue of the land. And even the amaSirayeli were willing to die for that particular land, because it links very nicely with what you just said about the issue of the land, that there cannot be any fundamental human rights or a right to life without a right to the land. And thank you for that, son of the prophet and son of the land. And I see that I know that Tutuzeli Mhlabane is making a comment, and he says the land, the plan, and the man. And my Tutuzeli Mhlabane is one of the descendants of the Motlabane family in the Nkonzweni amaSirayeli. And my suspicion is that he can rectify me if he is able to. My suspicion is that the Mhlabane is written in isiXhosa, but those are people of, I think they are Bakwena. Maybe you could regard them as Abasuthu. The surname is Motlabane in my understanding. So he can rectify me if there is something wrong that I'm saying. So thank you Mhlabane for talking to us. If there's anything that I've said that is wrong in relation to the surname Motlabane, you can send us a comment on that particular matter. Thank you for making the comment. But Zolani, let us then talk to these political opinions, these political views according to Enoch Mgijima. And you had said that in the early moments that Mgijima did not belong to any political party at the time, even though there was a political party that was established in 1912, the African National Native Congress. Can we take us therefore let's begin now to engage this particular politics, Zaka Mgijima, moving from the premise Yokuti, we are in the same struggle, but you, the ANC or the ANC, you are moving from the flesh, and Tina as amaSirayeli, we are moving from the spiritual realm. What are the politics according to Mgijima in your understanding? Take us through there.
Yeah, that's a very profound, statement that Prophet Enoch made, that when he then addressed the ANC through that communication, he said that siqinga ilitye elinye, nina niliqinga ngokwenyama, and then thina siqinga ngokomoya, or mna ndiqinga ngokomoya, as we have said, that we were pursuing the same struggle. And that struggle, the ANC was pursuing it in terms of flesh, and amaSirayeli were also pursuing it spiritual. Now, there are two key things about that statement. One, it must tell you that Prophet Enoch was not a member of the African National Congress. That statement, has got distinction, and also it's got similarities. And therefore he saw his task as different to that of the ANC, to the extent that the ANC is a political organization that has got a clear political program, that also has got a clear guidelines and so on, and that amaSirayeli were nothing like that. amaSirayeli were exactly, what the prophet had, said when he was called by God to gather his flock and to really bring to this world, a plan of salvation. Now, so it's distinct in that way. So no one could argue that Prophet Mgijima was at any stage a secret or even an open member of the ANC.
Or an active political participant in an organized organization.
Absolutely, he was none of that. But the similarity is that siqenqa ilitye elinye, and therefore, you know, we are both, you know, are pursuing the noble cause of liberating African people. And then the ANC was concerned about freedom, redemption of African people from all sorts of, you know, tragedies that were brought about by colonization, exploitation, oppression, and so on and so forth. While on the other hand, you have Prophet Mgijima, who, you know, was called by God to administer to African people, you know, a message of salvation. And I like brother when he's saying the land, the plan, and the man. So you need, you know, the land to establish a kingdom. No nation can exist without any land. And if Prophet Mgijima came as he came with a plan of salvation, he needed to gather his people in a land, and he needed to worship God and spread the message in a land, and also to make sure that he is able, you know, to save the souls that he wanted to save. So coming back now to the issue of the similarities with the
You were talking
ANC.
about the similarities, yes.
Yes, coming back now just to the issue of similarities, and that, you know, Africans needed redemption spiritual, because, you know, at that stage, you know, another context that is key there, at that stage, you know, the prevalent denomination were in the main your missionary enterprises. And
Okay.
you had some pockets of African initiated churches then, the Ethiopian church, the AME, and many other few, you know, African initiated churches of the time. But the mainstream churches were churches that, you know, were linked to the missionary enterprise. And having come himself from that history, he was a preacher in the Methodist Church, and, you know, he was of the view that, you know, those churches, they were worshiping God, but they were worshiping God with treachery. And therefore, part of his call was that Mabapume Ekringeni and worship God properly. So that was his spiritual, you know, purpose. He saw, which was distinct but also serving the same purpose as the ANC, because the subject of his preaching, the subject of his prophecy, was the same African people that the ANC sought to liberate from all other social, economic, and political being. So you can then see
the similarities from there.
Exactly.
And what you are also raising here, Zolani, is that you are talking about the similarities and the distinctiveness, and I find some two important aspects here in your thinking when you're talking about the spiritual aspect. You are saying Mgijima uti, but in this battle or this struggle, we are doing it and we are fighting in this struggle from a spiritual perspective. But Mgijima is holding on to a material base here of the land. He's talking about something that is tangible, because the land is tangible. As you have said earlier, that the land is life, or the land is linked to life. And therefore, the interpretation of even the spirituality or being involved in the spiritual battle against the European invaders, whether that is an abstract thinking majority of people can't see or can't feel, the spirit. But for his expression of the spiritual struggle, he had to make sure that there is the land aspect. So there's a spirituality and the land, and in this distinct and similarity that you are finding in Mgijima, which I find very interesting. And at the later stages of the the colonial period, you found people who then popularized the ideology of African nationalism, Abo Anton Lembede, who then bring about I'm saying, because I'm quoting from you in our discussion that we have had offline, where you were saying that Anton Lembede didn't come up with African nationalism. He has actually popularized it. And in the essence of African nationalism, you find that African nationalism defines and it says about some of its elements that it focuses on the spiritual interest of the individual, but also on the material interest of the individual. And you're finding this in your conversation about Mgijima. So can you see if there are any similarities in the African nationalism as popularized by Anton Lembede in the thinking of Mgijima and any other African prophet that might have emerged from that particular period? Are you able to find any similarities there? Because for me, I do find it. Hence, I'm thinking those were Mgijima's politics.
Yeah, look, the issue of land is a political problem. I think we must not run out, away from that. Even though Prophet Enoch approach it, from a spiritual perspective, but there is a theology of the land.
Okay.
And one of the essential elements of that theology of the land is that I have said, if Prophet Mgijima called, his followers to gather in Dabelang so that they may receive the plan and they may wait for the day of salvation there. So you needed a land for that spiritual purpose. So the land, therefore, has got a theological essence. Now, the political essence of that is that, his father had massive pieces of land that he owned, and many of which, was affected by the 1913 Land Act. Himself, he had a title deed to that homestead, where he then called people to gather it. And therefore, the loss of the land by his father or even some of their family land was what happened, not for spiritual reasons.
The dispossession, son of the land, the dispossession.
The dispossession was a political
it was lost. Ingathi yalahleka. No, zange ulahleke lamhlaba. Waxuthwa wabiwa.
Exactly. So, but that was a political problem. It was a political decision. Politicians met in parliament and then they passed an act and then they said, you Africans are going to be forced into about 13% of the land and then the rest is for us. And therefore, anyone, who showed any semblance of differences with that immediately become a political enemy. So the issue, therefore, of the stance that he took when he accommodated his landless people. I started by telling you that his followers were landless.
Okay.
So now the whites, the invaders, were saying to him, chase them away. Let these people go here. They don't belong here. They should not be here. They must go. And he gave them a choice that no one is here because of me. They are here because they were called by God. And also, he even gave them the choice to say, those who think that they want to leave, they can leave. And none of them left purely because of they could not listen to the invaders, and disobey what they believe to have been called by God. So here now you see the politics of provision.
Okay.
That when you're so you can never be a pastor and also be a prophet and be a leader, but you are oblivious to the fact that those you lead have nowhere to go.
And are affected by political decisions and political processes.
And even more fundamentally, they've got nowhere to go. And many of them, because of that.
Continue.
And many of them, because of that dispossession, they were also poor. They had nothing. And here was their leader.
So in their poverty, in their dispossession, in their seeking for or finding the spirituality, in finding their spirituality in Prophet Enoch Mgijima, they actually found their lives, because the European invaders and its regime had deprived them of the right to life, not only from where they came from, but also just in from the feeling of feeling deprived. They could not leave that particular land because it provided them with a space of being alive. And the second aspect was that from what I'm hearing from you is you are saying, therefore, Mgijima stood for a just cause in that particular moment, because it was unjust for the European invaders to take the land of the African people. And therefore, his view of saying, we are called here by God, and therefore, for us to be able to achieve the spiritual aspect of what we are called for, we have to stick to the land. And for me, that was one of the most just causes that a man of the cloth could stand for when he stands with his people. Are we moving in the same trajectory here when we look at Mgijima and his politics?
Absolutely. You see, he could have just opted out and play safe and said, this is not my problem. For me, even this land, there are people who say, no, these are the things of the flesh, of the spirit. I don't even need this. But it's impossible. Even in biblical times, you always had prophets, you had God's messengers who were presiding over certain territories, having a God's message and also delivering that message. So at any given stage in a biblical time, the issue of land has always been very central. Here is a very important thing. He did not only salvage those landless and poor, congregants or Africans. They also went further than that. And they were building an alternative society to the kind of society that the whites were forcing black people to live under. Because they started to build their own homes. They were building their own homes. They had surveyors amongst them. So they were building a self-reliant economy. They were trading amongst themselves. They were doing their own clothes. They were doing all of these things that will make them to be able to live independently of white people. When these ones wanted servants, they wanted slaves, and they wanted cheap labor in the mine. So amaSirayeli were actually showing the rest of black people that in actual fact you can live without the system. And that's what they were afraid of. They were afraid that if amaSirayeli succeed and everyone else is watching that and everyone else
follows that trend, yes,
they will follow that trend, and many black people can be able to stand on their own. Now, you can then come back to what you were talking about around, Anton Lembede. So you see that importance of, self-reliance. You see that importance of self-determination. You see that essence of African people, saying,
determining their own future.
Determining their own future, and also deciding how they are going to worship God, when they are going to, in their own way. And there was also another very central thing there, which the regime demeaned in so many ways. They used to demean the fact that he's calling himself a prophet. And even it was a misnomer in those years that African people could call
a black person, a kafir in the language of the European invaders, calling himself a bishop or a prophet of God. It was a misnomer. Yes, I hear you.
It was even worse that he calls himself and those as the Israelites. Because you see, the Europeans, what they also did, they colonized information. They make everybody to think that when you talk about the Hebrew people of the Bible, they are necessarily talking about white people. And it's about themselves.
It is deep, that one. Ibambe, must politic. That one is a little bit deeper. But what I'm hearing from you, my brother, and this example, we've got in the history of African people, whether in the diaspora or in the continent, an example of such people. For an example, Marcus Garvey. The Marcus Garvey influence, where there was a self-determination, building an alternative society. Marcus Garvey, what Enoch Mgijima did was similar to what Marcus Garvey has done. And what Enoch Mgijima did was also similar to what Prophet William Saunders Crowdy has done. And I've visited the headquarters of the Church of God and Saints of Christ in Suffolk, Virginia. The church there, as established by Prophet William Saunders Crowdy, has got a huge land. It has got an emergency room, a hospital, if we're to say. It has got the hotels. It has got a villages or a place of dwelling. It is a huge. There is no. There is so much emphasis on the aspect of the land in relation to these African people and their theology. So you are seeing this self-determination. Not only, it does not start with Mgijima, and also it seems like it does not end with Mgijima, because even way before the European invaders came, it seems like the African people had always wanted to self-determine. And even to this day, those who believe in African nationalism believe that they still want an alternative society to the colonial society. But some people, therefore, Zolan, they argue that Mgijima called himself, he called on the response of the European invaders. Because if he could have just listened and left and not mislead the people, I'm saying mislead in inverted commas, and not become a person owning gun, it would have he would have saved a large number of people from that Bulhoek War and so on and so forth. Do you want to say something there? Because some people are saying Mgijima was not even a prophet for that matter. So why didn't he just leave? He was just in jail. There's a word that they use. So how do you make a comment in that? Do you have something to say on that?
Well, look, the argument that he invited the response of the regime is misplaced, because one, it's a faulty argument, because it is moving from a wrong premise. And that premise is that you will accept that the smart regime, was a legitimate regime, which I don't. The smart regime, which was in power then, was nothing but an occupying force that had invaded and that they've dispossessed Africans of their land. So they never bought any land. So they've got no sense of ownership or even right to claim. The only claim is one. They are only claiming the land on the basis of one thing. And that is the right of conquest. Because of we have won this land, the barrel
they
of the
have
gun,
won that
it is
in that, yeah.
They don't have another claim. Their only claim to the land is that we won it through the barrel of the gun, and therefore, because of we have won it, is ours. So I'm interested in these ones who think that whites will ever give away their land by pen and paper. You and money.
When you say pen, when you say pen and paper, what do you mean? Just clarify
Through
that
some
before we
document,
move.
willing buyer, willing seller, and then there is money there.
Okay.
And that we can get our land by such scheme. I actually wish them well. I hope that can work because whites are clear that we want this land through a gun, and therefore, if you want it, you'll have to take it with a gun. That's their politics. They might not say it today, but that's what Jan van Riebeeck told the Khoisan.
All right. No, I hear you.
When the Khoisan asked him, as for you to say that this land is too small to accommodate both of us, who should in justice live? Is it the indigenous or the invader? His response was that the land is now mine because I've won it by a right of conquest. So in other words, there is no claim of legality. The land issue is not a legal problem, it's a political problem. The fact that they are making it a legal issue, it is faulty. Even if we were to test that legality of their claim, they say in their own Dutch and Roman law that there is no right that can arise out of an injury. That's number one. Even ourselves as the Africans, we hold that ityala aliboli, and therefore we reject extinctive prescription such that a crime cannot be excommunicated because of a passage of time. So what they did, they took that land unjustifiably through unjust wars, and therefore amaSirayeli then did not recognize the legitimacy and the authority of the regime. So it cannot be that the regime would claim that we were legally, enforcing the laws around the land as if they bought the land, as if the land was theirs. So that's one aspect. The second aspect key is that the attitude of the regime was that any African created and also African controlled organization, religious or political, was a source of rebellion and therefore it must be cut. So they had a problem.
Whether there was such as long as the African people were together, it meant that they are for the invaders, the Africans were a political movement, irrespective.
Yes. And therefore they must be crushed.
They must be exterminated.
Exactly. So they had a problem with any church or any religion that was not in the control of the missionary enterprise. So Mgijima just became a victim purely because of their attitude was that if black people come together on their own, unsupervised by whites, they must be busy with some scheme to overthrow the government. So if it was not for that reason, they would have also found another reason to fight
to kill them. Yeah. No, son of the land. Let us close this one. Let's come to a more interesting and more contemporary questions now. Now, Zolani ugama wakho. This now gives us a segue into the last theme of our discussion. What would have been the spiritual politics of Enoch Mgijima today when comrades of the ANC, we must add there, when comrades of the ANC built a non-existent 15 million stadium and banned municipal buildings in a municipality named after Enoch Mgijima? This question provides us with a nice segue because already in your discussion earlier, you were saying that Mgijima, Prophet Enoch Mgijima's politics were that of justice, were that of, you use the word of righteousness, you use the words of uprightness, and so on and so forth. Now, ugama wako, Mr. Zonyane, is asking, the first part, what would have been the spiritual politics of Enoch Mgijima today in relation to that non-existent, embarrassing saga of the 15 million? But secondly, the municipality named after this great icon of amaSirayeli, the comrades continue to burn municipal buildings and municipalities after named by him. Any views on this particular matter?
Yeah. Look, my view would be that, his attitude today would have been exactly the same attitude he had to the authorities in Bulhoek. Because, you asked me in the previous question, I wanted to bring this one, and also it's relevant to this question. You see, at Bulhoek, what was at stake there was that the stance of amaSirayeli actually called the regime and the missionaries bluff. Their claim to being Christian was called bluff. Their claim to being exemplary, holders of human rights and democracy. Those years there was no issues of it was called bluff because they were exposed for their hypocrisy. So you were ready to kill me. You were ready to kill me and to kill congregants when I had provided shelter for them. I had fed the hungry. I have given clothes to the naked, and I had been there to comfort my brother. I had provided, a safe haven for my brothers. I have done all of these things that Jesus, if you do those things to your other brother, you have done them to me. So if you kill me for that, while at the same time claiming to be a Christian, claiming to be this. So it was a battle that, at the end of the day, they chose a side, and that side showed that their action was neither Christian nor about human rights, and therefore, if Mgijima had surrendered then, it would have meant that he is also surrendering on those values. Now, that's the same thing today to our politicians. And that is, South Africa considers itself to be a highly religious country, of maybe 70% Christian and this. But we might have a 90% religious. And yet, some of our leaders are claiming to either to be Christian, Muslims, or African traditional religion, and every Sunday, and they, or Sabbath or wherever, they claim to be holding some values that accord, with their stated beliefs, and those values about, honesty, those values about feeding the hungry, those values about, fairness, justice, restorative justice, social justice, and those values are about, peace. Those values about righteousness, and all of them are claiming to be practicing those things. But at the same time, we are living, in an environment where the very people are more than happy, that they will rather build a stadium of 15 million rands for corrupt practices, while in the very same vicinity, there is abject poverty. While in the same vicinity, there is unemployment, there is inequality, there is underdevelopment, there are no better schools, there are not all of these. So Prophet Enoch died exactly such that, I cannot accept a regime that say it's okay for my people to live under that. So it's even a misnomer that those things could be happening in a municipality that is called under Prophet Mgijima. So what we see happening today, we see happening today there, it's actually telling me that those people don't even know who Prophet Mgijima is, and also what the values that he espoused.
He stood for.
So
Okay.
if they did, we should not be seeing the kind of things that we are seeing there. If they did, honor his values, they will be looking out for the weak. They will be looking out for the sick. They will be looking out for the hungry. They will be talking about our social and economic development in those areas, not what we see.
They would be looking
today.
out for the Black African people. They would be looking out for the oppressed, as the way that Enoch Mgijima has done. But Masoleng, I'm very concerned on this topic that Zolani Kamawako is asking. Probably we need to further engage it further, but we need to speak up on this matter, and especially the church amaSirayeli. I can tell you now, they have not spoken much extensively on this matter, or they have not done it in public, if I were to say. I haven't seen any statement, nor from the family Mgijima, nor from the church amaSirayeli, which carries the legacy of Enoch Mgijima, to lambast the saga, the embarrassment which the local municipality, the Enoch J. Mgijima municipality, has come to be under the name of such a great man who stood for the justice of the African people in his time. I think we need people who are going to step up and speak for the right thing. And if kuna amaSirayeli that are listening here today, I'm posing a challenge to them to say you are not fair to the legacy of Prophet Enoch Mgijima if you continue to keep quiet with the mess that is happening at your municipality. And we should not be running away from this, because we were taught that because William Saunders Crowdy, who shares the very similar views spiritually and theologically as Mgijima, he said you must speak the truth even if it takes your neck. So amaSirayeli that are watching, they need to speak up about this. And Masoleng is raising this and says it's not fair to have a municipality that is named after a man that espoused such great values, but that municipality is a messed up municipality. I hope I'm not misquoting you, Mdaga Masoleng. Any closing remarks on this particular point, John?
Okay, absolutely. In actual fact, when I heard that they were naming that area through him, I thought, wow, maybe these comrades have taken a decision or a commitment that they are going to follow in his footsteps. So,
Okay.
you and those footsteps are what we have talked about. Those excellent values. So Enoch Mgijima, Prophet Enoch Mgijima, cannot exist in the same sentence or paragraph with greed, with corruption, with maladministration, with nepotism, with all of these things. So let them use that, that name sort of as a guide, as a light, as a shining star, a light to follow. And we're not saying we're all perfect beings, but at least if you are going to lead people, don't lead them with treachery. If you are going to lead people, you must lead them with honesty, you must lead them right, and also you must take care of their basic interests. So if they are not prepared to do that, let them call that municipality with whatever name. For as long as they are still calling it Enoch Mgijima municipality, so we will always reference their own action on the man they have named that municipality on. And as soon as we see their behavior is against that, we will call them out. So they must really do the right thing, and that is to go back, and espouse the values that Enoch Mgijima lived for, and also try to be better human being. If that is too much to ask, then they can name that municipality with one of themselves who are going to do these greedy things.
One of the same the self thieves and the stealers. And the greed. Mdaga Masoleng, thank you very much for having a discussion with us. We appreciate your time. You always give us something to think about. And I hope that people can continue this conversation outside this platform. Thank you very much, sir. We are going to send you back into our producer, and we will keep in touch. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you very much, my brother. Thanks to the contributors. We will engage more on the comments.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, brother.
What we have learned today and what we were discussing is that we actually had some things and themes that we can continue to discuss even outside this platform, and continue this conversation, because this conversation is an important thing. What we have outlined, not exhaustively, we've spoken about what does it mean in our context of this discussion, the politics according to the topic. And we then said that politics should not always be a dirty thing. Politics should not always be something that is regarded to be a dirty game, but politics should be just. And that the liberal democratic processes that we see today are not entirely the only idea of how politics should be. And then we further said that Mgijima lived in a context or in a period where there was a deprivation of a right to life of an African by a deprivation of a right to the land. So what Zolani was saying was that the land cannot be divorced from the right to life. There cannot be any fundamental human rights without the right to the land. And the dispossession of the African people in South Africa, Azania, as we know it for some of us, is that there cannot be a right to life. And he further stated that the issue of the land is not a pen and paper issue. And he quoted one of the greatest thieves, Jan van Riebeeck, when he spoke to the Khoi and said, "You're not going to get this land because we've won it in the right of conquest." And we had further stated that the Mgijima was not an active participant in the political organization that was then available at the time, the African National Congress, but he had a view in politics. Hence, we said that the politics according to Prophet Enoch Mgijima is the topic. So no claim, whether from the ANC or any other person, is legitimate to claim that Mgijima was a participant, but he clearly stated that he is fighting the similar battle or the similar struggle that was there by the ANC, but his were spiritual and the ANC was through the flesh. When he said, we then teased out some aspects of African nationalism and some of Pan-Africanism as understood by Anton Mzwakhe Lembede when we were talking about the aspects of self-determination and the linkage between the spiritual interest and the material interest of the African people. So we made examples of people like Prophet William S. Crowdy, Marcus Garvey, and others who were emphasizing the importance of self-determination as an outlook of the African people, whether in the continent or in the diaspora. Lastly, we were making a comparison with the type of embarrassing municipality of Enoch Mgijima in the Eastern Cape, Kufutshane naseKomani and other areas there, where Masoleng, and also the question was raised by Mr. Zonyane when he was saying that how and what would be Mgijima's politics in relation to the lies, the corruption, the thievery, maladministration, and the lack of consciousness and conscience that is taking place in the municipality named after this great prophet of the land. And we had said that from this discussion, if those people want to continue using the name of Prophet Enoch Mgijima, they must live up to the values that he espoused for. But if they not, they must rather opt for the name that is going to determine and that is going to be reflective of their thievery, corruption, and maladministration. And I made a comment to and made a challenge to the people who are coming from the legacy of Enoch Mgijima church to say that they must speak up against that maladministration. They must speak up against that municipality. They must speak up against those leaders of that municipality, because what is happening in that municipality is wrong and cannot be happening under the name of Prophet Enoch Mgijima. This was the discussion of today. And we are asking you once again, follow us, Pond the Politique. We are available on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There on YouTube also, you need to subscribe, and subscribe. Thank you very much for joining us. Umtungo uyengwayo Malinga Undima. Unkumbuzo, uyabulela ngokuba kunye nani. Ngemini elandelayo, iveki elandelayo, sizaphinda sidibane futhi sikwela lizwe. Hopefully, I will be back at my studios. All the best. Bye-bye.